the New European Voices and Existential Risk project has brought together a network of an exceptional group of young people and future policymakers from across wider Europe, with members from Lisbon to Moscow, who are all committed to working on existential risk. We're bringing in new talent, we're nurturing it, and we're connecting the people working on these various different facets to get a better understanding of how to deal with these threats in the round. By existential risk, we're talking about threats that could wipe out life on the planet in general, and within Never, we've specifically focused on anthropogenic or man-made existential risks. So the first example of that would be nuclear warfare, with the creation of the atom bomb in the middle of the 20th century. Since then, other existential threats have emerged, most notably climate change, but Never's also dealt with biological threats and threats stemming from emerging disruptive technologies. This report aims to give practitioners the skills and knowledge they need to effectively communicate with policymakers to get traction on these existential risks. A lot of the time, government, policymakers, officials, there's so much on their tray all the time. They always focus on the immediate term and the short term when it comes to fixing problems. Policymakers need to be thinking about long-term policymaking, the future prosperity, future security, future existence of the planet by getting ahead of these risks, thinking about them together and taking action now.
Our report really looks at the problems that policymakers face when they're confronting these long-term issues. It varies from risk to risk. We do see with nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, we have actually a very successful treaty in terms of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, but getting traction on disarmament is much harder. With some of the more recently emerging threats, geopolitical competition means that the world is struggling even to come up with the governance frameworks, because countries or groups of countries are competing to actually design the frameworks. A theme that came up again and again also was disinformation, both disinformation and misinformation. And then finally, we looked quite a lot at fatigue and fatalism. This stuff is scary. You know, thanks for continuing to watch our video. A lot of people might turn off because they hear words like risk and they don't want to know, they feel overwhelmed, they feel miserable. So our report is trying to also find ways to tackle those psychological factors that make people not want to confront the difficult reality and prioritize short-term keeping life easier rather than dealing with the issues that they know are coming for them but are a bit further off. We really look at the need for coalition building and cooperation. And, you know, this is a major issue today where we're having a lot of problems in the multilateral system and getting consensus or agreement on anything. But I think, you know, overall, that most of our experts would argue that you do need actually the US and Russia to be talking, you need the US and China to be talking, you need all countries to be able to work on some of these issues that face all of humanity and the planet as a whole, and sometimes require building coalitions with those that are very non-like-minded because collective action is so necessary. We also look at campaigning and communicating, and quite a lot of our report is really giving advice to people that want to influence in these spaces. So it's sort of idealism meeting reality and trying to make progress somehow through a quite messy geopolitical context.